on the show today, Laura Khoudari. So Laura is a wellness coach. She's a writer. She's known for her work in strength training, combining fitness with trauma. As someone who is a little bit obsessed with trauma and also lifting heavy things, which was your book titled "Lifting Heavy Things"? It was something very similar to that, wasn't it?
Yes,
Um,
lifting heavy things.
it was, yeah. I love trauma. I love lifting heavy things, literally. So
Me too.
I was like, I'm amazed anyone has brought these two things together. So I thought I've got to get her on the show. So Laura, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I also am pretty, call myself a trauma nerd, and I am also a fan of lifting heavy things. So there you go.
Boom. Where are you in the world?
I split my time. I'm in northeastern US. Right now, I'm in New York City, and the other half of the time, I'm in Western Massachusetts.
Cool. Going to be in New York later this year, so I'll give you a shout. I was to keep in touch with people. Let's hear a little bit about your journey though. So, how did you get interested in trauma and weightlifting? This is, particularly this combination. Let's hear your story.
Sure. I mean, I think like for a lot of people who get into this work, it comes from my own personal story, right? Um, so I was a very unlikely fitness professional. And I actually, was the kind of kid who like cut gym class to go smoke cigarettes in the park. And I did not want to have anything to do with this body. And but at age 20, my back went out, and the doctor said that I would benefit from strength training. It would help me with my back, and he prescribed PT and strength training. And I did the PT, and my back got better enough for me to kind of make it through life with chronic pain, but like get through life. And so I opted for that because there was no way I was going to the gym. And it wasn't until I was like 27 when I moved back to New York City, which is where I'm from. And my mother, it's like, I am tired of you walking around looking like you're 70.
Hmm.
And she, she was like, I want you to meet my trainer. He's really nice. He's going to help you get out of pain. His name is Big Ed. And I was like, no.
Big Ed. I'm imagining some like black New York dude, big like I'm sort of picturing. Well, who was Big Ed?
Big Ed, Ed Williams. He's from a native of New York, although he's now in Georgia. And I met him. He wound up being my trainer and eventually my first weightlifting coach. And he helped me get out of pain. And he was really nice. And he started to focus on what I could do. And I was so used to like what I think a lot of people are used to in gym class and mandatory sports who aren't athletic or who aren't naturally showing skills, being made fun of, not being told you're no good, being picked last. Like this is all normal stuff, but it does leave people as adults feeling like they can't do things. And rather than focusing on what the injury was keeping me from doing and what my skill was at, where it was what I couldn't do, what I lacked, we focused on what I could. And I actually think there is something to a combination of his kindness and his large size. He actually created like physical space in the gym where I felt okay, right?
Yeah, got it.
And so we trained together. I became pregnant. I had a child, and I kept training with him. And I saw people doing in about 2013. I saw people doing Olympic weightlifting in my gym. They were all big dudes, lots of bald heads. And I was like, I want to do that.
Should we say what that is? Because some of our more hippie listeners
Sure.
might not get the difference.
Sure. So yeah, there are a couple of different barbell sports, and I wound up engaging with more than Olympic weightlifting, but Olympic weightlifting is the barbell sport that you might see in the Olympics, the Summer Olympics. So there are actually three parts, although one of the lifts they tend to be put together. There is the snatch, which is when people get a barbell up over their head and catch it in the bottom of a squat and then stand up with it. And then there's the clean, which is when they catch it up like in a grip with the bar going across the front of their shoulders. And then the jerk, which is how they get it overhead. right? And so if you've ever watched weightlifting in the Olympics, that is the sport we're talking about. And at the time, CrossFit was starting to gain momentum, but not like what we would eventually see. So I hadn't seen women weightlifters outside of the Olympics. But I'm seeing these people I know, yeah, sure, they're fitness professionals or very athletic, self-identified athletes doing this sport. But I finally had enough confidence that I was like, and I had Ed, and I was like, I want to do that. Um, and he was like, I know, because I guess he had seen me watching them. And part of it is that it felt very rebellious at the time. I mean, I was, in my mid-30s. I was a woman. It was not in a facility where there were other women doing this. And I had, spent my whole life being like, I can't do sports and women don't do things like this.
Sort of pushing back against kind of gender roles, gender stereotypes a bit, like women are supposed to be skinny but not strong. Like now that's a bit more normal to have
Right.
sort of, like strong, kick-ass kind of, CrossFit type women. Whereas
Right.
I'm
But I
back in the
came of
day.
age in the Kate Moss era, right?
Okay, so girls go to the gym to get skinny or toned, and guys go to get big, and that's the kind of stereotype, yeah.
And I like to do things that sort of thwart the mainstream. So I was like, and I really fell in love with the sport, and it was an incredibly empowering experience. Separate from that, shortly after I had really become involved in just like having a good time training in the sport, feeling good about myself, I experienced a trauma outside of the gym, and subsequently developed post-traumatic stress disorder. And my relationship to training shifted and became obsessive. And I was going very hard. And I had taken up other sports. I had taken up karate. I had taken up powerlifting as well, which is another barbell sport. And for those who don't know powerlifting, the way you compete in powerlifting is there are 3 lifts. There's the squat, where you put a bar on your back, and the idea is to do as much weight for 1 rep as you can with proper form. So the squat is when you have the bar on your back, you squat down, and then you stand back up with it. Bench press, which people are fairly familiar with, where you lie down and press the bar away from your chest. And the deadlift, where you lift the bar from the ground, stationary from the ground, and stand up fully with your arms down, not overhead, and then put the bar back down. So these are really demanding sports, weightlifting, karate, and powerlifting. And I was training 10 times a week. And there are only 7 days in a week. And I was really controlling my food intake, and everything was for sport and to be better, faster, stronger. And I did this until I came full circle and my back went out again. And the thing was that the way I was approaching training was actually being really supported within the community. Like, it was like, look at Laura, she's a machine. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm a machine.
The opposite of
And
embodiment, right? From an embodiment.
100% not in my body.
Yeah.
And I was training to become invincible. And I was actually really unwell. And I was completely leveled by this back injury that happened. I had a partial paralysis in my left lower leg. I could barely walk around the house, and I had been training to keep myself safe in the world. So it was terrifying that now, not only couldn't I fight, I couldn't walk, right? It was very scary. And this happened right around the time The Body Keeps the Score came out. And I am in bed. I am looking desperately. I was actually looking for a different title. Somebody had told me about John Sarno's Healing Back Pain. And I wanted something immediately. And when you're in New York, New York City, you can often get things pretty darn quick.
Yes, right.
So, and I was like, oh, well, I can't get healing back pain right away, but this book sounds interesting. And so I got the body keeps the score. And I do have a background in doing a fairly academic background, doing a lot of research, and I was not intimidated by the book. And in fact, I saw myself in the book, and I was reading it the way one might read a mystery novel, like I was so engrossed because I was getting answers. Because the whole time it felt compulsive the way I was behaving, and it was compulsive. It didn't feel like my true self. It felt like something had taken over, and I felt like I had transformed, and I thought that this was it, that I was like this, irritable, angry, controlling, trying to control my body person. That was how I was going to have to be. And I'm reading this book and I'm realizing, like, oh, the same way trauma shifts the brain. And then I got to understand maybe what was happening in my brain. I could use the body to, at the way I was looking at it at the time, go back. I would say you don't go back to the way it was. It shifts, but you can rebuild. And I was like, this is great. And I tried trauma-informed yoga, and it was terrible for me. I was incredibly triggered. And it wasn't the fault of the teachers. It wasn't the fault of the modality. It's a wonderful modality. It wasn't for me. I didn't feel safe. I did it in studios. I did it at home. I would later learn from Peter Levine, who's the creator of somatic experiencing. In one of my trainings with him, he would talk about yoga and meditation both prompt a sort of stillness. And if you associate stillness with a trauma,
like a helplessness, passivity, captivity, or something like that.
Exactly. It can wind up being a very triggering experience. You can feel unsafe. And I was like, and I was like, I wanted to get back into the gym. I had been in physical therapy. I was getting stronger. I wanted to be able to be in my body in the gym the way I had before, the way I learned to before trauma, when I first started working with Ed, to slowly appreciate my body for what it could do. I wanted to get back to that. But I couldn't believe it. I was like, trauma-informed weightlifting isn't a thing?
Yeah, how is
Just
it not?
really, I was shocked.
Especially because the gym's more popular than yoga by a factor still of several.
I
More people go to the
100%.
gym than yoga. You'd think it made their world. And also in terms of empowerment, of course, lifting heavy things is going to make you feel empowered, right? If sort of empowerment is the opposite of trauma in many ways. Like how is martial arts have discovered trauma? People
Yes.
like Paul Linder and there's people, just one of my students, Georgina, does trauma-informed kickboxing for women in the UK. I know there's trauma-informed jiu-jitsu in Canada. Like the martial arts world discovered it because there's so many trauma survivors coming to martial arts to try and heal who have been assaulted and things like this. But yeah, absolutely astounding. I started looking for it, and your name came up, and and only recently, kind of thing, right? Like there's not a whole movement.
Well, there is now a movement. It's
Great.
new, and so I found one person in Toronto. She's not doing it anymore, but I did take some training with her, and I was like, this has to be a thing. And no one was really listening to me within fitness here in New York. So I was like, okay, I guess I will become a fitness professional. So I changed my career.
Was that like a ridiculous idea at the time? Or
Absolutely, absolutely. I have my master's in public administration. I work with my mother in a real estate business. Before that, I was a librarian.
And you had to
I
fight
was
some lycra and become a PT, right?
and I was like, all right. And I got on Instagram with my 10 followers. I would say banging my pots and pans, this can be a thing. This can be a thing. And I studied somatic experiencing. I did some trainings with Bessel van der Kolk. I did some trainings with Peter Levine and also other teachers. Those were just names people may know. And it was really apparent to me how we could combine the way models like somatic experiencing, and even I didn't study sensory motor psychotherapy, but from my understanding of sensory motor psychotherapy and polyvagal theory, how we could start combining these models with the models of exercise science that you apply in strength training. This idea of controlling the amount of activation, but using stress and using activation in order to slowly expand somebody's capacity for nervous system activation, and then taking rests in between sets and doing things to help bring yourself back down more to your baseline, and
Right,
slowly
just
titrating.
if I can jump
Yes,
in.
sir.
So weightlifting provides a stress which is measurable, controllable, safe, assuming the basics of lifting,
Right.
in a way which you can repeat, you can control, you can find that sort of window of tolerance, sweet spot. I mean, that's what we should be doing just to develop strength, right? You don't want it too heavy, you don't want
Anyway,
it too light. You've got to be in the, 12 to 30 rep range or whatever, you do a few, 2 or 3 sets. And there's something about that strikes me as super practical, because I'm doing a workshop tomorrow where I stress people out in various ways. I throw tissues at them, I shout at them, all consensually and all with calibration. But this is something that's very easy to calibrate. It's literally like 5 kilos more, 5 kilos less. You can replicate it. You can do it in any city. Like, I'm going to go to a gym in Brussels tomorrow. There's one near me. I'm traveling. It's super easy to find compared to a martial arts studio, for example. Hotels have them. And it helps people apply stress and manage that stress. And as you say, and then there's also a period of there's also a lesson in like not overdoing it. So
not
as a trauma
overdoing it.
survivor myself, one of my biggest lessons in the gym has been like, oh, what do you mean you don't have to do every set to failure? There's another way to do it. My practice at the moment is stopping 2 reps short of failure, which is
Yeah.
incredibly difficult for someone like me who likes to push everything to the max. And, it's a classic trauma symptom. So not only have I got a practice of managing intensity, I've also got a practice of not pushing it too far, which is incredibly useful from a trauma healing point of view. Are we on the same page here? I'm just kind of making this up.
Yes, 100%. I think there's a combination. There's people who push and go too far. And what's interesting to me is that it really flies in the face of even fitness culture in general, but it shouldn't, because even just from an exercise standpoint, like
Right.
I want to get stronger standpoint, this is what you do. The other thing that it's built into strength training is, I mean, you don't have to, as we know, but the embodiment piece is there, because in order to do the rep right, you're not paying attention to what it looks like. You shouldn't be looking in the mirror. You shouldn't be paying attention to what you're doing to the equipment. You should actually be paying attention to how your body's moving, which means starting to practice feeling your body. And for some people, that is very challenging. For some people, this is the part where somatic experiencing was very helpful with my practice, not even being able to tap it, not knowing, and then realizing like, oh, I actually can't feel this whole part of my body, because
Right.
maybe
Like,
they
I felt
had
it with
been
muscles. I felt it with muscle
yeah,
groups. Like, where's my lats? Oh, I'm ignoring this whole. I'm an embodiment teacher, and I can't feel my delt or like some whole muscle group. I can't get that mind-muscle
right.
connection. It's so useful for me to do strength training, just for body awareness. I never got that meditating.
Yes, right. No, not, I mean, moving meditation will allow you to do that. For me, that is what weightlifting is. It is, in fact, a mindfulness practice. Not always. I mean, sure, I show up to the gym and like have a good time. I kind of I strangely have this like inner gym bro that comes out. But I make a point to at least have some of my practice be a meditation.
Yes.
And that's something I also stress. It's like, it doesn't have to be the whole thing. You don't have to show up all the time, but make your warm up embodied. It's a way to practice and you might not even, or try to be embodied. That is a place where you can start to practice to feel certain parts of your body. And if you can't, it's okay. Keep trying to. The thing with weight is that it gives you feedback in a way that can often help. So, you know, and that's something a lot of people have been talking about. I see the example of with weightlifting sport and like barbells, people talking about the squat, you know, having that weight on your back really gives you so much feedback. I think that we get that feedback from all sorts of movements though. And
Well, in that way, it's easier than meditation, right? In the sense, I think
so
yoga is
much.
more popular than meditation, probably always will be, because stretching gives a sensate anchor to the mindfulness. It cools the attention. And strength training, I think, even more than stretching, cools the attention. It's like you try not paying attention when you've got 100 kilos on your back or on your bench press. Like just try daydreaming. You know, there's an anchoring effect there that I find incredibly helpful.
I think we should be clear to listeners that you actually should not try daydreaming. He was kidding around. It seems very dangerous.
British humor, American listeners. We have irony. Yeah. New Yorkers normally get it, actually. New Yorkers.
100%. My audience gets you. But yeah, no, it's 100% true. I know at the same time that I was working to get back to strength training and shift it and make it something that was actually really supportive of my mental and physical health and wellness. I was also trying to cultivate a mindfulness practice and just a seated practice. And it was in many ways much scarier than
more intense, but mentally, emotionally, right? Because you're just bouncing
100%.
around with nowhere to put that hyperarousal. And when you're weight training, if hyperarousal comes up, you got somewhere to put it. And if numbing comes up, it ain't going to last very long, you know? So, I mean, assuming safety of practice, because there are, I imagine, some huge safety issues with people with numbing and hyperarousal hitting the bench press, right? Like there's going to be some considerations there.
You know, I mean, I coached in a barbell club just for like mainstream fitness. Sorry about that. Just for, you know, regular folks who were not looking to talk about their feelings. But I applied a lot of the same principles, and it definitely helped keep people who were just there to lift safer. I had one guy who he came in, he was very strong, but like kind of chaotic, and he was doing powerlifting. And he was very, very tall. Like I couldn't spot him. I'm only 5'5", and he was over 6 feet. But I remember watching him and the way he would he had his ritual where he, you know, a lot of people, it's a good idea when you are regularly lifting, you sort of set up a protocol of how you start something. And it helps you create this pattern of this is how I do this lift and gets you into the body, and does create more of a ritual. And, you know, he did his thing that he did to like whatever he was thinking about, he steps back with the bar. And then he sort of would like plummet into the squat and then like lose all this control. But he was a really good athlete. And I asked him, like, what are you thinking about when you set up? And he told me what he was thinking about, and he was thinking about something incredibly emotionally charged. He was thinking about the loss of a parent and how he was doing it for them. And I was like, that, I understand the impulse to like want to get out your feelings, 100%. And that is not going to help you be in your body to do the lift well, to stay safe. And so we talked about his setup and what can you think about. We actually talked about, it turned out he couldn't feel chunks of his upper back. We worked on getting him into his upper back without ever talking about trauma, without ever just talking about being a better power lifter. And it was incredibly grounding. And he was so grateful for the practice. We never really talked about it. He was just like, man, Laura, I just feel so good with you. Like, you really helped me. I'm a better lifter, and I just leave here feeling great. And I'm like, yeah.
Look, if I get to one of your workshops, classes, I'd love to, by the way, if I'm in New York, I'd love to. What are you going to cover? Like, what are the main, let's just sort of bullet point it quickly. Like, what's some of the main stuff would be, because I'm
Well,
imagining it's not kind of like, how to grow my chest or, improve my triceps or something. Like, what are the main things we're going to hit?
I actually, unfortunately, I am no longer doing movement workshops. I could take you through the kind of things I would cover that I cover in the book still. Um,
What's in the book? What's in the book? I
w-
haven't had a chance to read it yet, so let me know.
sure. So the book is intended for folks who just want to start bringing this more embodied approach and a trauma sensitive approach to their own. It doesn't even have to be lifting practice, really any sort of exercise practice. And you just start by thinking about like, uh, what do I even need from this practice? What are my, there's a couple things. What am I looking to get? What are my goals? And, am I looking to be more embodied? Am I looking to be stronger? Am I, so both sides of it. And then what do I need in order to feel okay in the gym or when I'm exercising, whether maybe it's I don't want to go to a gym. I don't feel safe in a gym. What would I need in my home? Surprisingly, I think many of us learned during the pandemic very little. You can get real MacGyver with it. And so, that is definitely something I help people do is put into the conditions in place you need to even begin to approach exercise and weightlifting in this with this intention of becoming more embodied and feeling safe and good in your body. So we start there. And then I take people through how can we start to practice being embodied? How can I turn a movement into an embodied movement? I also talk about in moments of what do we do if we get triggered? What do we do if we are having a hard time coming down from hyperarousal or back up from hypoarousal? How do we even identify those things? What are the symptoms of hyperarousal or hypoarousal?
Jump in.
And
Do you think that weightlifting can sort of spike the hyperarousal up so people can relax down? Because my experience is some of the most relaxed I ever am is after very intense exercise. Like I can't go straight down from yoga. I can't go from
right.
a little bit hyperaroused to relax, but I can go from a little bit hyperaroused to really intense and then relax.
I think, yeah, the short answer is yes. The slightly longer answer is you need to make sure one should be checking in to make sure they're not exercising till collapse. And that's sort of what you were speaking about before, like doing every set till failure or
Right.
doing every set
That's
till, like, a perceived rate of like 80%. And that is better for strength training. It is better for your nervous system too, because if we strength train, and this was something that I think a lot of people think like, oh yeah, I'm going to use weightlifting to get it out, to get out the anger, to get out these
fastest model, right? Yeah.
frustration, right?
Yeah.
You go to collapse, you overwhelm your nervous system, and you're stuck in a cycle.
What about
Sometimes when you,
sorry,
sorry,
after you.
another, it's, I think there are different variables you can play with, like, how do you go hard? Going hard can look like less weight on the bar and doing something called tempo work, which is when you
Yeah.
slow down the rep or you pause at the bottom of a squat. These sorts of things, moving slowly and really making yourself pay attention to your body is incredibly hard. And playing with all of those different types of levers as opposed to I'm just going to smash it. You're
Yes.
more likely to start to increase your capacity as opposed to just like wiping yourself out and going into collapse and doing that over and over and over again. We're looking for opportunities to increase our nervous system's health and also even integrate some of these sort of wordless narratives that we have in our body without even really necessarily always having to talk about them, which is a huge part of what I talk about with this is like using movement to actually heal your trauma is a break. Talk therapy is incredibly important. However, it's so easy and now with social media and we're always all talking and telling people everything, it's so easy to start to become your trauma story.
Yeah.
This is a break from that. You
It's
don't
boring as well. Yeah. You don't have to talk about
it's
it.
it's not the least interesting part of who we are, right? There's so much more to us. And so with my work, I actually never required, of course, if people wanted to share, I was going to listen, but I never required people to share their trauma story because we're working with the body to start to just integrate some of those experiences.
And is it that, trauma stories also have a trauma body, which may be one of kind of victimhood, collapse, uh, lack of agency. It's hard to have a body of victimhood, collapse, lack of agency, again, while lifting weights. So it's actually a direct challenge to kind of the learned helplessness of the body, for example, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
you'll build, like, if somebody has been violated, building a body of strength, like literally, I imagine is super helpful for that empowerment journey.
Yes. There's, the, oh, I can do this part. There's also, there is the change in physical posture that happens with some balanced strength training. If you're talking about the collapsed victimhood posture, I think if any listeners wanted to picture what that would look like, you're probably going to picture somebody closed off, rolled forward, maybe arms across chest or like across midsection. Strength training, you're going to start to work, especially with, and we can talk more about how people can find, because there actually are now quite a few trauma-informed trainers. If you're working with somebody who is trained in this or even corrective exercise, they're going to look at your posture and they're going to work with you to develop something to counterbalance it. So if you have this closed off posture, you're going to start to cultivate back strength, which is going to open you up. And, just having a more prideful stance, having a stance of greater self-respect helps you feel a greater sense of self-respect. Even if it's just for a moment, if you start to become aware of those kind of shifts in your body, it helps body up and mind down, right?
Right, and there's this sort of momentary state shift, but we're also working with people's structure. It's body work in that sense, right? Like
Yes.
if you do enough, I don't know, face pulls, you are going to start having that more opened up structure.
100%. You stay that way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're forming the body in a certain way, and that way is, stronger, less collapsed, less rigid, perhaps as well.
I mean, I think that was a big part of it for my own experience before the trauma. Why weightlifting really shifted my whole life before any of this. And it's why I wanted to get back to it, because I could see it would be so helpful. Was I had been insecure. I didn't think I could do things. I didn't want people to see me in the gym. I had chronic back pain. I was like, you know, on my computer, hunched over all the time, rounded over. And but my back was, in hyperextension and all these things. I I had better posture. I had less pain in my body. I had things happen in my body that gave me a greater sense of self and self-worth and self-esteem. I I wasn't doing I wasn't doing it for sport. I in fact I did a few competitions. I don't like competing. I just liked feeling really good and knowing that I could train that way. Um It changed my life. I was just talking about this out of context of the later career shift. Like, I just was less from strength training. I went from somebody who was used to hiding and low self-esteem and really didn't want to be in my body and didn't want people to see me, to somebody who was really ready to take up space. So much so that after trauma, when I couldn't find trauma from weightlifting, I was like, all right, I'll do it. No, I wouldn't have been that
Right, right,
person.
right. So you say, take up space. That's a somatic quality, right? But it's also
Right.
something you have to do in the gym.
Mhm.
It's you even use the phrase like feel good, which people think of naively. Now, some of that is endorphins or, hormone levels, right? Physical, just physiological things. But also part of the feeling good is the expression or the controlled expression of power, right?
Yep.
It's the managing intensity. Like that's part of the embodied sense of feeling good after a workout is that you're a bit less meh and a bit more raw, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
100%.
Do you think there's different qualities with different lifts even? For example, one of the things I prescribe to students of mine who have boundary issues, which is a lot of British women, for example, is bench press, or if they can't do bench press, chaturangas or push-ups or some kind of pushing away movement,
Pushing,
which is,
100%.
that's the embodiment of no, right? To push
Yes.
something away from you. Like a little kid will have that embodiment. So
Uh,
pull
a hundred
movements I
percent.
prescribe less, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts and sort of qualities from different movements.
The people who are dealing with boundary issues, whether it's a violation of boundaries or a difficulty enforcing them, I go for a push, like you said, a push up, a bench press, even things like more active. One thing that I would like to do is with like a med ball chest pass, and then you're actually also interacting.
Got it.
So they are pushing away, but there's also, hopefully you're using the rapport to also do some talking and just kind of getting in the
Co-regulation.
groove. The big one that I also go to is actually when people have a hard time asking for help, asking for things, and then we go with pulling. I don't think we don't, and especially, in things like yoga and actually a lot like in our life, we don't do as much pulling. We
Yeah, it's
do a
almost
lot
none
more
in yoga.
pushing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to actually work on pulling, whether there's this machine that I love. I have no idea what it's called. If you know, tell me. I don't know if you've seen it. It's like a rope on a loop. And so you sit and you can pull, you can
Okay.
change the angle, but it mimics kind of like rope climb, something I have never
Okay.
successfully done.
No.
But I really like, and you can pull towards you or you can pull this way. Of course, there's the rowing machine. There are lat pulls, there are seated pulls. Most of us nowadays need to be doing pulling anyway, but really bringing that attention to what it feels like to pull towards you and to ask can be really empowering for people who don't want to ask for help or don't want to ask for things.
Nice,
Um,
nice. So what you bring towards you, isn't it, as opposed to what you push away? I
yeah.
kind of push. I notice I feel different. I do a push-pull split in the gym, which for listeners means certain days of the week I do more like pull-ups and pulling movements, and other days more like bench presses, pushing movements. Like I noticed there is this subtly different somatic quality at the end of the workshop, from doing it. And
Yes.
obviously I skip leg day, so I have no idea about that. Any other sort of movements or what would things, particular muscles? Because I find almost the muscles almost have personalities. There's almost a quality to each one that I can access.
I agree. I think, but I kind of think it's person to person.
Mm.
So one thing I encourage people to do, especially if you're having a hard time here and you're open to this idea, say you notice that there's a certain muscle offline. What did you say to me? Oh, my delts. Let's just pretend.
Mm.
Um, is to actually try and so this is where I say things like I'm the weird trainer because I will encourage people to sit down, and I always encourage people to have a journal in the gym. And of course, you'll see plenty of people writing in notebooks in the gym because they are tracking their workouts. You can also track things that come up for you, different somatic experiences. So start to notice the different qualities that different movements have for you. Because I do think while there is this sort of there's some universal rules, we also bring our own experiences to these. So what's going to work for you? And so in your notebook, one thing you do is if you notice, your delts are offline, your biceps is offline, actually either write down a dialogue with that part or as if that part were speaking to you, just like free write. And it sounds really silly to a lot of people. I come at this with a background in writing, so I've been prompted to do this even outside of this work. But you will begin to understand the story, personality, and also maybe part of why you're not connected to it. And you can do it with a part you are connected to. It is another way to get to know yourself, is to actually like sit there. And for me and for a lot of my clients, writing is a great way to have that conversation with the part of your body. Because I do think different movements have a certain type of quality. I think that deadlifts are incredibly, they are like exciting, and you know, you're at the top, you're standing upright, holding a heavy weight.
Rah!
Yes,
I
right? Like
exist. I'm
100,
Spartacus.
100%. And at the same time, right, what the deadlift is going to mean to me and what those muscles mean to me may in fact be different for somebody else,
Yeah,
right?
individual variation, cultural variation, different movements are going to have different symbolism to different groups of people depending on cultural background. Like in New York, for example, there's lots of populations which have different senses of things. So yeah, there's a mix, isn't there? There's a sort of generic human frame, but I think there's a variation within that.
I will say deadlifts are among my favorite, especially when I work with women who don't think they belong in the gym, that they're not strong, that they can't possibly do this. Because if you can coach a deadlift correctly, especially if you can use something more like a trap bar, which is a barbell, but there's a hexagonal shape and you stand in the middle, so that actually shifts where you are in relation to the weight and gravity. And it's better for form if you're not training for sport. It's actually a better movement than with a straight barbell. If you can coach somebody to do it correctly, the first time they deadlift, they are going to pick up so much more weight than they thought they could if they really
Yes.
didn't think they
Yeah,
belonged in
yeah,
a
yeah.
gym.
That's a
It is a
solid.
quick way to show a person who thought they weren't capable enough to be there that they are capable enough to be there.
Yeah, yeah, that or a squat press is the other one I think where you can just put massive weight on it before you can push away from that kind of lying down seated position like quite a lot of
Yes.
weight as well, right? Like I remember just
Yes.
thinking, God, where's the limit of this? Just adding 20 kilos, and still I hurt myself, obviously. And what overhead presses strike me as another one with quite a lot of emotional content, where you lift something above your head. For me, there's a
Yes.
sort of celebratory, like I exist kind of, I have a right to be here kind of element to that.
Yes. If you can do an overhead press safely and with good form and feel good about it, that's great. But a lot of people, I find the overhead press, especially with a barbell, obviously, if you're working with, this is the kind of thing where you might want to make the case for using dumbbells or kettlebells,
James, yeah.
because getting into that proper, that having the mobility to do a good overhead press is hard. However, if you are somebody who has the mobility to do either a push press, so you use some of your momentum to get it up there, or that strict press or military press where you just press it up like you're talking about. Yes, I have definitely heard people say they love it. They get so excited. I also had a client who she had a history of shoulder things, and she just dislocated shoulder, and there was so much fear around it that it took a very long time to get to a place where she could do a push press or get really any overhead work and feel good. That said, when she got there, she felt really proud of herself, right? And really good.
What what's the weirdest thing you do in the gym? So you sound a proud to be weird like me, and I'm you're definitely not I can't imagine you doing sort of too much conventional stuff. So what's the weirdest thing that makes other people in the gym go, who the hell is this woman?
That is a funny question. I don't think, well, here's my thing about being weird in the gym. I don't think anyone notices, because I think it's literally things like I am writing in my diary in the gym.
Yeah, yeah.
The movements I do, I think are all conventional. I will say, I do find that I think people, as a very odd, like real mommy looking woman, I am a middle-aged mommy. I look like a middle-aged mommy with my gray hair. My physique, it does not look like somebody who is particularly strong or fit or likes the gym. I'm pretty soft and I am very strong. And so when I go into the free weight section and I start doing rows or whatever next to men I find that the younger men actually are usually very cool. It's actually more like men my age,
Oh, really?
kind of
Okay.
are like, oh, and older men. I've actually had men move away to a different part of the gym.
You scared them off. It's interesting you said the young men are cool. I'm around quite a lot of like young bros, and I sometimes mentor them a little bit, or spot them and things. I'm kind of like cool Uncle Mark. So there's the bros in the gym, and they're quite cool. They're quite
Yes,
they're all right. The young
I
guys like sort of 14 to 21 kind of thing. See a lot of them.
I I have definitely found, and in general, I mean, I don't know if this is everywhere. I will say in my little microcosms in the New York barbell club scene, as well as in Western Massachusetts, which that it is very the men there. I think a lot of people will have a preconceived notion that they're all just like angry meatheads, and I would like to say there are plenty nice meatheads like myself.
Yeah.
But no, but like they just, and I think there's so much practice of being in the body and being strong and getting to show people strength and power in this way that it also allows. I know so many young men from coaching who are also really seem to be comfortable being vulnerable. Other things that, we're just starting to talk about that are important areas that have been denied as part of masculinity that actually are incredibly part of being a man, right? Being kind and hugging and asking people how you are and talking about feelings. I know more the I met so many men who were able to do that through strength sport than I met outside of strength sport.
You
And
think
I think
vulnerability
it's
is sorry after you.
oh, I
Yeah.
just think I think it has a lot to do with um the embodiment practice, with the being able to like say, yes, I'm strong, but also you don't really have to prove yourself. You don't feel a need to prove yourself anywhere else because you've proven yourself here.
Right, right. I've known many very, very polite, nice martial artists, and
Mm,
it strikes me that the gym is a practice of strength, but it's also a practice of vulnerability, right? Like, lifting heavy things creates a vulnerability. Like it's like, hey, bro, can you help me out? Because I might get stuck. Once you've been stuck under a bench press, it's a unique
yes.
experience. And
Yes, it is.
and certainly, if you're training anywhere even close to failure, there is an experience of weakness and vulnerability there for which I don't think that, I've fallen to my knees after squatting and just been like, I can't
Sure.
stand now.
Yeah.
And there's a weakness there, which is very humbling, I would say.
But I mean, I think, the thing is that it's not it's the weakness comes from after a real display of strength. And it's not really weakness so much as a need for rest.
Sure, sure, but there's an experience of like,
Right.
oh wow, I can't do anything now.
Yeah. Yes.
That's not necessarily an experience most young guys have, right? They're
Right,
pumped
right,
up and
right.
full of testosterone. So good. What are you working on now, Laura? What's your sort of main focus or main uh
Sorry.
lead edge? You got a cat there.
I forgot to close my door, and I have a cat who's about
Cats
to
are
jump up.
always welcome. Bring the
Oh,
cat
okay.
on. We love kitties.
Oh,
So
she walked off. Maybe she'll come back. Oh, here she comes. So I am
hi,
actually,
boss. Excuse
this
me.
is Gigi,
Hi,
and she is
Gigi. Do you
getting
want to
on
show
my
the
lap.
internet your ass, Gigi? That's what
She
cats do.
does. It's like, "That's your little face." Okay. Um, I'm actually working on a second book right now. It's different from lifting heavy things, but um, it's about it's a memoir told in essays and recipes. I'm actually also a very avid home cook, but it is
Saw that.
about
I saw that on your Instagram. What, you're cooking as well? Yeah, that's your thing.
yes,
And she cooks, Barry.
absolutely,
So
absolutely. Listen, cooks,
what do you
but
cook? What do you cook? Per certain cuisine or?
uh, no, just I mean, I cook whatever strikes my fancy. I think I've been doing a lot of like kind of Frenchish, but I cook with whatever I've got on hand in the winter. In Massachusetts, I'm near a lot of farms, so I like to do, your seasonal thing. When I was lifting a lot, I cooked a lot of meat. um, in all the different
Yeah.
ways. So it changes, but it's what I'm really actually it's about eating disorder recovery, and it's about answering questions like, what do I want to eat right now? And what happens when you begin to really listen to that and honor that? And when you start to give yourself permission, what other things do you start to realize that you might want? And what other things might you start to realize are okay to have? So that is what I'll be looking at in my next book.
Excuse me, I'm allergic to your cat.
As long as you're not allergic to my next book.
No, I've just bought your other one. I'm supposed to buy them before the interviews, but I never get around to it. So I've just bought your other one. I'll be listening to the audiobook of that.
Sure.
Lastly, any question that you've never been asked in an interview that you've thought, you know what, I wish someone would ask me that. That's the really interesting stuff.
Oh gosh. Wow. I have done so many of these. Something I haven't been asked that I wish I was asked.
What do you like? You know what? This is the interesting side of what I do. They never ask about it. Like, does that make sense?
Well, I will say one thing that people seem to be afraid to ask about that I wish they would. They sometimes get asked in the book.
Yeah.
When you listen to it, when others read it, they will notice that I actually not only don't tell my trauma story, which we touched on before. I actually very clearly say, I'm not going to tell you my trauma story. I am going to represent it with these empty brackets when we need the context. And I think that decision to me was so obvious. I was like, I can't write this. The reason why I initially did it was like, I am not in a place to talk about my trauma story publicly. I wasn't, when I started writing a book takes a while. So when I started the process, I was like, I am not ready to talk about this. And everybody on social media is always talking about it. And I'm like, I can't do that. So I'm not going to. And what I started to realize was I could continue to do this work. I could help people. I could get help without telling my story. And in a world that seems to be driven by this, self-exposure, and
confessional, narcissistic, badly boundaried, fucking American oversharing culture. Yeah, I'm with you.
I was like, hey, this is a cool alternative. And it became like, I'm not just doing this for myself. I'm actually doing this to set an example that it can be like this. But let me tell you, it has been to try and establish myself in this work and get, press in the beginning and get people to write about me in fitness magazines. They come at me, oh, they'd want me to tell my story. And I was like, I'm not gonna tell my story. And then they'd be like, well, what about your clients? Why don't we talk about your clients and their stories? I was like, I'm absolutely not
No way.
letting you lose some of my clients.
Laura, I really respect it. I really respect it. I
And
think there's a dignity in it. I think people are oversharing on the internet.
all the time.
And you know what I like about it as well is if someone shares a trauma story, if yours is worse, in inverted commas, you go, oh, they don't know. And if yours is not worse, again, inverted commas, right? Because it's so subjective, like, hey, I was molested, but not that badly or something, then again, you might say, well, you know what, their message doesn't count, right? So we can discount people's message. And I think there's a dignity in saying not everything has to be public. It's no one else's bloody business. And let's actually demonstrate some boundaries. Like, you don't have to know everything about my love life. These things can be private. That's okay. So yeah, I really respect that. So great. Like you even more now. That's brilliant. Good. Okay. Where do people find you, Laura? Where do they go to check out your stuff?
LauraKhoudari.com is probably the best way to find me. So I'm guessing my name will be in the title of this podcast, but just in case, Khoudari is Laura, Laura, and then Khoudari, KHOUDARI.com. Everything is sort of hubbed there. I am also on Instagram, not telling my trauma story, at Laura Khoudari. And Those are really the best ways. I have some stuff on Medium. Actually, if you are interested in the trauma-informed weightlifting and the things we were talking about, I definitely have some stuff on Medium that you might find of interest. And the other thing I just want to give a quick nod to is that because I did mention there are more people doing this work. I have on my own website a resource for people looking for trauma-informed movement practitioners who offer remote services. So you'll find that it's under the Movement at Home page. But there are also here in the States, two really reputable programs who are training people. They're doing really good work, and you can reach out to them to learn more about their certified trainers. There's Trauma Informed Weightlifting, and they are affiliated with the same organization that does trauma center, trauma sensitive yoga. And also Hope Ignited also offers a trauma-informed training for personal trainers. And so it is a growing number. I do know that there are a handful in the UK as well. And so I have really good SEO, so I pop up, but there's more than are popping up. And people will be like, you were the first. I was like, there's no way I was the first, but I have really good SEO. I was among the first.
Google, you might for those search engine optimization for those the Googlers. So
yes,
and part of me wants to just become a gym bro trauma trainer. I feel like I might suck everything off and just make that my career. But that might just be because I'm like weightlifting. But
it happens to the best of us.
Laura, it was a total pleasure. So thanks to you and your cat.
All right. Thank you so much for having me, Mark.